and welcome back to part 2 of Frivolous Gravitas. You've got yours truly, Christopher Driver, here with my co-host Jordan Roy and co-producer. We're happy that you're tuning in for this part 2 on the subject of forgiveness. Part 1, we talked about forgiveness of self for our own actions and forgiveness of others for others' actions that inflict some kind of harm or pain upon us. We've talked about unsolicited apologies and fake apologies. Pretty much everybody should be familiar with that because I think we all do it and have done it to some degree. Sure, certainly kids have done it. So if you haven't done it lately, you probably did it as a child, at the very least. Moving forward, I'll let Jordan take the reins here and just sort of take us into some new territory, some deeper thoughts and more, not convoluted, but I guess more complex items of respect to forgiveness.
Yeah, because I'm super deep. I dabble in deep.
You dive.
Yeah, I really do. I wouldn't mind doing an episode one day on just that whole thought process of, like, you know, things that sound deep and being deep. Because
we should do a woke culture one.
Oh gosh,
we could be rant episode number 2 on the woke culture.
Oh, I could get into that thing that the New York school division just put out on what to their white things, where it's just like, where is your level of white supremacy? It's just like, are you what? This is literal racism. And it's just like, I read it and it just made me angry. But now one of the things, I guess that's an example of one of the things I wanted to get into, segue, was, and I was thinking about this a bit too during the break, was that idea of imagined slights. So a lot of what we think is an offense against us is not. You know, they did this. It's like, yeah, but that wasn't a bad thing, or that didn't actually happen, or that's all in your head, or, you know, or they did that and it wasn't actually, like, they didn't mean it like that.
Yeah, it wasn't directed at you. It's just something that happened that affected you.
You know, so you say something like, oh man, I hate those people that do this. And you're like, oh, I do that. Does he hate me? Did he mean that about me? So then you get that, you know, you bring that onto yourself and you have these imagined slights, and you can create, the human mind is amazing at creating imagined threats. Just look at any conspiracy theory where it's just like, this or that thing's out to get us. Well, it's actually this thing, and the lizard people, blah, blah, blah. And you get these really complex things of, you know, the forces leveled against, you know, like this, you know, one guy in the middle of nowhere. He's just like, and that's what I'm fighting against. It's like, okay. Or the forces of this or that, or, you know, the Nazis are taking over America, or the communists are taking over America, or America's taking over America, or something. Or, and the, or like the 1619 project or something stupid like that. I mean, going back to wokeism, but like, these, but if we see them all day on like on a personal level. It's a lot smaller than that too. Like you buy something, the clerk says something, you're like, what did he mean by that? Or, you know, you go online and you're texting people. It's like, and you're trying to interpret the tone of a text, and then you create an imagined slight, or you create an imagined passive aggressiveness to the other person. And all of a sudden you are in contention where there was none. And now you can take umbrage and just be like, how dare you, blah, 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 blah. Or you can, you know, be like, you know, you need to ask for forgiveness for what you've done. And the person going is like, what? I need to ask for forgiveness for saying have a nice day in like
that for using the wrong tone or something.
Yeah. Now I used to be really bad at this because I remember when I was working some of my jobs, I had a bit of a permanent death glare on because I was just not enjoying, like, just going to work. And I remember one time someone asked, Jordan, are you having a bad day? And I'm like, apparently I had this like, and I was just probably thinking about school and stuff while I was, making the Starbucks drinks. And I was just like, no, I'm actually having quite a good day. I'm just not showing it on my face. I don't have to be like, oh, every day. Like, I don't have to display my happiness to all times. Or,
but I think a lot of what we do is sort of, it leads to that just by the nature of how our brains work and interpret reality. Like, our brains are constantly receiving stimuli from like our auditory and taste and tactile senses and visual sensories. So like our sensory perception is constantly being manufactured by our brains into a reality that we then interpret as what's actually there,
right.
and true. So it's like our brains are designed and function based on creating these types of ideas. So I don't think anybody's really immune to it. We all find imaginary slights, even though it sounds like something, oh, I don't do that, but everybody does it because that's how your brain works. It has to do that.
Yeah, and you can get rid of it a bit with just a
Logic.
Self-honesty. Logic's like, no, you're just tired. Like, there's a lot of there's a lot of stuff in that I realized that I do, not because it's like, oh, just because they're this or those people are that. It's like, I'm hungry and I haven't eaten in a while. Or I haven't had enough water today, or I didn't get enough sleep. I'm just tired.
Yeah, or I've been holding a pee in for a really long time and it's just uncomfortable.
I remember being in class and having to pee, but we had a guest speaker, so I was just sitting there like, it's just like I was just like, I don't want to be rude, but I look like I'm just fuming. But I should have just left. But
but see, that might have been an interpreted slight from the speaker,
right?
If you walk out mid split, and that's exactly what we're sort of getting at.
Now, if you're neurotic, you're gonna look for these things, and you're gonna create these things, as a matter of course. And you're gonna ask for forgiveness. You're gonna look for reparation, but you're not going to be, it's not going to be easy to get, because the other party is going to be like, either, I don't see that as a bad thing, or that's, you're interpreting it wrong.
Or like, they'll offer an insincere apology just to get you over it, kind of.
Yeah, or they'll do like what like we were talking about in the last part, where they'll give a public apology. I'm sorry that my tweet offended someone. I know that the plight of insert
victim name here.
Victim category here has a tough time, being hunted in the streets or whatever, as they are. And they it's they just do the thing and move on, which is a polite thing to do, but it's not honest. It is polite, and polity, but you don't have to be polite in every situation. They don't have to be nice.
And you can be genuine in your attempt to be polite too. So even insincere apologies aren't necessarily inherently negative, because the person might genuinely say like, I didn't do anything wrong, but I want you to feel better.
Yeah.
But it doesn't quite hit home the same way.
Right. The other thing you can do is try and create more understanding, which is a noble goal. Okay, so we obviously misunderstood what was going on. I didn't see it as a slight. I'm sorry you took offense to it. Here's what I meant. Hopefully in the future you'll interpret my responses more accurately, and I'll keep in mind that you are a fragile
sensitive being.
Yeah, sensitive being,
a very feeling person.
And we now we know more about each other, and we can exist in a state of camaraderie instead of enmity. And that usually doesn't get taken very well, because like, you're just trying to cover up. But whatever, if someone is knee bent on something, it's going to be very hard to convince them otherwise. And sometimes there's just nothing you can do.
And it's
Now,
almost partially justified too, because if my experience is based on my interpretation of the world around me and somebody else's experience is equally based on their interpretation of their reality, it's almost arrogant to suggest that my reality is more valid than someone else's, even when they're wrong. Like
yeah,
in your own point of view, it's still just as valid for them to have a feeling that's worth like minimizing, or a negative feeling that's worth minimizing.
and
Not
that's
minimizing, that would make it less important. I mean, mitigating.
yeah. Now, that's why we bring in third parties, who
Arbitrators.
arbitrators, because we need someone, because we have a conception of reality, they have conception of reality. We bring in a third person to see which one is closer to reality, or if they're both off base, or actually you both have good things, so we need to come to compromise, or you guys need to just stop fighting and never talk to each other again because you are both off base, so we're just going to separate you forever because there can be no compromise or shared ground here.
But objective opinions are really valid, especially in subjective conflicts.
Yes. Yeah. So you can say, okay, from outside, here's what I'm seeing. And they both gang up on the arbitrator and, man, look at this guy, look how stupid he is. And they, find true love again, and the divorce court is no longer needed because they just come together in their hate of the divorce.
You sound like a novelist now.
I'm teaching too much storytelling, I think, maybe. Maybe I'm reading too many books. But so sometimes you're just not going to win, and sometimes you just need to they obviously have a weird conception of reality, so I need to play it as you will, but I guess the question is, should you ask for forgiveness for something you didn't do? Or even so, you have a false you have a perceived slight, but then you have perceived innocence, which is, I guess, when we bring it in. Now, when it's proven,
part and parcel.
Yeah, I guess when it's proven, you bring the arbitrator, and then you have to agree. Okay, here's how the game works, says the arbitrator. And because we all think we're right, the arbitrator says, okay, you're the one that's actually in the wrong based on whatever, and you're going to have to do this. So, okay, now I'm not allowed to play I'm not allowed to play umbrage anymore. So I have to play the polite card instead of, the understanding card, because we tried to, make understanding a thing, but now I'm just going to try the apology. I'll do my forgiveness because I want to move forward. So you're going to essentially show your stomach to the predator, be like, I'm sorry, please take what you will. And, so we can all get on with our lives and drop our pencils and move forward. Now, it really gets bad is when someone doesn't, it's like they ask for forgiveness, but what we want is not forgiveness. We want their destruction. Okay, then you're dealing with someone that you can't really deal with. And then now this leads me into my my big example that I was going to talk about. Now, the biggest example of forgiveness happened after the Second World War. Now, to preface, forgiveness again is not justice. Justice was served by a different department in the form of Nuremberg trials and war crimes tribunals. And
they never finished those, eh? They're still working on it.
Sometimes they were finished by third parties. I'm thinking that some of them were just assassinated.
Yes, that's a polite
way. But one of the things that they did after World War II was not just the big guys, but a lot of the small guys. A lot of people were, I think it was the Americans that ran this. They kind of just took everyone in Germany together and asked them what involvement they were with the Nazis, and they categorized them, and they kind of just said, if you were just kind of like unwilling but participating, and slap on the wrist, all right, go back to being German or something. And I think I went through this in Richard J. Evans' book, The Third Reich at War. At the end of the book, he details how the dismantling of the the regime there was handled. Now, I don't want to get too much into that because we have in the first half of the 20th century 2 examples of what we were talking about. One act, actually 2 acts of forgiveness after the end of World War II, because we learned our lesson after the end of World War I, after the Treaty of Versailles. Now, we kind of all know the story, but the nations got together, blamed Germany for something they kind of really didn't do. And the Allies, especially Clemenceau of the French, wanted blood. They were looking for revenge for a war that had reasonably and understandably made them quite angry at the opposing side. Now, the problem is that they didn't just want blood, they wanted to cripple them because, after the Franco-Prussian War, French and Germany were always kind of like, oh no, this is mine, no, that's mine, no, this is mine, no, that's mine. And then after World War I, they took back Alsace-Lorraine, which the Germans had taken. So we have this wheel of fire that we've got going on. And now after World War I, you get the Treaty of Versailles, which the instituted a debt, war debt on reparations on Germany, which they actually did pay back very recently. I was surprised, but this honor in honoring, respect in honoring your debts.
Not only that, they bailed out the Eurozone, like almost unilaterally. It was Germany that helped all of Europe.
Yeah,
which is really ironic, but
it's like, not
kudos to them.
It's not ironic because what happened was after World War I, they did not try. They didn't look beyond the end of the war. We need to win the war. Okay, what happens after the war? Well, after the war, we'll just go really business as usual, except we'll be super victorious and in a lot of debt. And everyone was in debt, not just the Germans, but the Germans got hit very hard, and it made them very resentful. And the politics of the time led to, surprise, surprise, that level of resentment led them to turn to a leader. Now, not everyone turned to a leader, and there was a lot of dirty tricks, blah, 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 not all Germans, blah, 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 blah. It happened, though. There was enough support that Germany just went with it, and it led into a conflict which was 10 times worse than the first one. Now, that conflict was a perfect place for resentments to be created, and we still have resentments from that time.
What conflict are you talking about?
The Second World War.
Oh.
So the First World War led directly into the Second World War. Now, after the First World War, Versailles was essentially like picking meat off of the body of Germany. Now, the Second World War was won, and what happened wasn't was a lot different. What happened was the world essentially forgave Germany and Japan and rebuilt them and made them, stood them back up. We punched them down as hard as we could. But instead of like saying, and learn your lesson, and they're sitting down there all resentful, blah, 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 pick them up and say, it's okay. You learn your lesson. Germany is like, I guess. And now we have 2 states which are these bastions of freedom and personal freedoms and equality that are seen as two of the most free nations in the world. And like you just said, Germany was able to pay off their debt and bail out the rest of Europe. I'm not going to get into the economics of that, but these countries are not seen as, the tyrannical, evil things anymore. We forgave them and they moved past it, and we helped them back on a track that move them away from totalitarianism, move them away from these genocidal tendencies, away from immorality.
And that was all part of the Treaty of Versailles too, where, you know, free navigation of the seas, open trade agreements, and
well, yeah, Versailles
treaties had to be public, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so that was the treaty of the treaty that ended World War II was a whole bunch of treaties, but the peace after World War II, after Versailles, was just like, you owe us. You're not allowed to have an army. You're not allowed to have any respect. You're not allowed to have any money. You're not allowed to have any fun. Everything. Your economy is, you have to have this type of economy. Feel bad.
But that was all temporary, though. I mean, the Treaty of Versailles was initially, in my understanding of it, was to set them on a long-term rule of open democracy.
It was. They didn't do a good job, though. Here's some democracy as a treat, and also, like, you have to pay us back. And I guess I'm leaning a lot on I'm leaning a lot on a lot of stuff, but I keep thinking of John Maynard Keynes's The Consequences of the Peace, where he was at Versailles and he talks about Clemenceau just, looking for blood. He didn't want, Clemenceau didn't care. The British and the Americans were more interested, especially Woodrow Wilson, who were looking for, with Woodrow Wilson's League of Nations, who were looking to institute a new order, a la what happened after World War II. But people weren't interested in that, because one of the major powers, France, wanted blood. And the British people, to some extent, wanted blood as well. And it's understandable. We can understand this as people. It's like, why would they do this? Don't they know that World War II is coming? It's like, well, hindsight's really fun, isn't it? Because, if we go to war with someone, it's really easy to be resentful, especially with those levels of casualties, when everyone knows someone who's been lost.
And on the flip side, it's really easy to not be resentful and criticize people for not forgiving them when you didn't go to war, right?
Right.
Like, having not spent any time in the trenches and being shot at and bombed and like mustard gas and, having your friends and family, everyone in your country affected all over the world. It's really easy for us now in peace times to say we should just forgive them.
Yeah. And which is why it was such a hard thing, to my knowledge, after World War II, to just say, okay, you know what? Let's make Germany, let's build it back up, instead of, just punching it down. Now, the Soviets did not have that same mentality at all. East Germany was robbed of skilled labor and manufacturing tools and technology, was all taken into the Soviet Union. It was just taken out of East Germany and brought into the Soviet Union. This is mine now. I want it because I threw bodies at it. But what we did in the West was a lot more humane. We set up markets. We set them up with, is it the Marshall Plan? Yeah. Where we essentially just threw money at the world. The Americans literally just threw money at the entire planet and to rebuild it. And it worked to some extent. We ended up with a very strong, financially independent Japan, although they have their problems, but we also ended up with a very respectable Germany, one that we forgave. But the thing is that we forgave them, but we haven't forgotten. They will always say, never again, we shall never forget. Now, the Japanese seem to have a problem with remembering certain parts of their history, especially the parts where they decided to take a vacation in China. It's a scientific journey. It's like, oh boy. And I'm not saying that the Allies were the bastions of morality in themselves. We were better, but that's not the point here. The point is that these are examples of what happens when you take the harder path, the one, not the instinctual path, beat him down so he doesn't get back up. But the thing is, you can't, you can kill a person, but you can't really kill a nation.
For their spirit.
Yeah, and if you keep beating them down, they'll just have more reason to get up and hit you and try and beat you down. The cycle continues, and you can make up a reason for having an enemy or making someone an enemy easily. You can pick someone randomly on the street and make 3 reasons why you hate that person. You don't like the cut of their jib. You think they walk funny.
They swear too much.
It's a dog whistle. They got this skin or that skin. Yeah, exactly. And so you see that way he, turned around there. That's a dog whistle for this. And it's just like, oh, geez, you can make stuff up. We're really good at that.
Like the Pepe meme.
Yeah, that was.
Like, how do you make a green frog into a white supremacy logo? Like,
you just tell
it's
people.
It's a cartoon, dude.
You just tell people, or that like the symbol where you do this. Yeah. It's like, oh, that means this. It's like,
or this means Illuminati.
Yeah. Well, I feel like
as if one God didn't exist, like the idea of one God didn't exist before the Illuminati came into power.
Well, and we all know the Illuminati is just a front for the lizard men. Like,
yes, for the Jewish space lasers.
Yeah. God, if there were only Jewish space lasers, those would be so much. Those would be so useful for like other things, like drilling on the moon.
I still can't believe that a U.S. congressperson actually believed that. Like a grown, educated adult leading the country anyway, that's insane. I guess I need to forgive insanity.
Well, it's yeah, we might have to just be like, you just kind of just like shake your head and move on. It's none of my business. Well, it's
for me, that's the purpose of this channel, is so that stuff like that is recognized and known, just like on the dime, to be insane, so that people don't just hear it and say, oh, this prominent person actually believes in this like completely retarded rhetoric.
Yeah.
Like I want a channel where people learn to think for themselves, and I'm hoping that's what Frivolous Gravitas does for people, is to help them point out that kind of absurdity.
It is absurd, but like there's a lot of stuff that doesn't really sound absurd that we can get into, which we won't because time, but that you hear over in the news and you're like, can you believe that so-and-so of this party or so-and-so of that party said this? It's like, yeah, I can. I don't believe it, but I can put myself in a position where I can believe that. The other thing is that I'm getting told that this is how you should think about this. And it's just like, no, I will make my own decision based on evidence that the media isn't giving me. They're just telling me feel like this. And I'm just like, I need evidence. What's actually happening? I'm going to go do research, and I'm going to come and be like, okay, so that person is a bit insane, but this whole topic's insane on both sides. So I'm going to go and I'm going to go work in my garden, cultiver notre jardin à la Candide. So, and that's kind of where I'm sitting at that. Like, I can't. It's like, how can you forgive so-and-so for saying this? It's like, because it's not my place. He didn't say it to me. It has nothing to do with me. He was talking about people in India. Like,
but getting back to our episode, how do we drive that with forgiveness of people for saying ignorant things?
Now, I have weird opinions.
Because ignorance feeds ignorance. It sort of goes back into that cycle that we're talking about. It's not just violence that begets violence. It's like ignorance begets ignorance, and disinformation campaigns are propaganda. Like, it's all kind of interwoven, in my opinion.
Well,
like war is all politics, right? And so are politics
by other means. But yeah, it gets really complicated at that, because you can't, like, if you go up to, your MP or MLA decides to be an idiot, and you go up to them and be like, it's okay, I understand where you're coming from, but like, could you do better later? And they'll be like, yeah, but all my other constituents believe this. And you're like, do they? You write your MP and you say, like, what's going on? But this is directly related to me. I can be righteously indignant about anything that's happening in the world. I can create an opinion, and create that their immorality of something that's happening in Uzbekistan. Can't believe there's someone doing that. And because it's immoral it offends me, and therefore I'm offended, and therefore they've done something against me. Cool. But like, again, if you are part of the nation and everyone's around you speaking, screwballs, and you're sitting there being like, this is a lot more nuanced than anything anyone's talking about. And I guess you have to become active in the issues that actually affect you. But again, with politics, it's easy to create imagined slights as well. Very easy. Can you believe what this senator from Oklahoma said the guy in Minnesota? It's like, cool. It's so, it gets so complicated, and there's so many factors involved at that point that
don't you find that they like generate the complication? Like that complication isn't just there on its own.
Yeah.
If people were competent enough to assess reality for what it is, they should be able to discern the difference between somebody saying something completely insane and running to war over it, and them saying something totally insane and impeaching them over it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when Hitler started talking about the Jews, a rational society, hopefully in today's society with educated population, they would just laugh him out of office, hopefully, because they understand it's stupid.
Now, he was always kind of talking about the Jews, and there was that rhetoric was a lot stronger back then.
Although but like the forgiveness aspect comes in.
It seems to be building up on both sides. I've noticed lately is that both the left and the right are becoming anti-Semitic.
That's exactly what I was going to get to, is because lack of forgiveness leads to radicalism, I think.
Yeah.
That leads to the bifurcation of public opinion.
And like, because the left is blaming
everything on the right.
And they're starting to see the white supremacists being, the white supremacists are just led by the Jews, and everyone's just like, okay, wait, what? And then on the right, you get the the usual rhetoric where it's just like, well, all the Frankfurt School was led by Jewish scholars or something. And it's just like,
yeah,
okay, wait, what?
Universities are overrun by the left.
Like there's some Jewish conspiracy, which is absolutely bonkers, because if you've ever met a Jewish person, you're like, well, which you have probably. Well, you're in Winnipeg, that's a substantial.
Being a Jew, yeah.
But like, they're just people, and people like it sounds cool, like in a movie, it's a big conspiracy, blah blah blah. But it's like, I don't know. He reads some Machiavelli, and he's like, these things are absolutely ridiculous. Conspiracies over two people, and his advice is, good luck, buddy.
Yeah.
And
imagine if humans were so coordinated we could run the world from a small group of people
for 6,000 years.
Yeah, how much intelligence and coordinated effort it would take to like completely wash over the entire planet's population.
Yeah, because there's some guy like 6,500 years ago sitting around in his proto-Jewish area, and Abraham's just like, okay guys, I got some big brain time thoughts here. Like,
let's take over the world.
Like, it's ridiculous.
It is so ridiculous, but people believe this shit. Like the Rothschilds and the Bilderberg group or whatever.
Yeah, when it's so much easier explained by like
reality.
Wealth begets wealth, and the tragedy of the commons. Like,
yeah.
It's like,
yeah, it's just funny to me, but it's only funny in the not funny sense. Like it wouldn't be funny at all if there weren't serious people thinking this, right?
Right.
But I can't help but think there's like this issue with forgiveness, in the sense that if you just forgive people who think insane things and do nothing about it, that's still not helping anybody. And if you don't forgive them and you create an opposing party, and all you do is slander the other person, like you have in American politics as just
Canadian
an obvious
politics.
example. The lack of forgiveness creates a greater radicalism on both sides. Do you know what I mean?
And
so it's like forgiveness causes you damnation, and lack of forgiveness causes you damnation. So like, where does a rational forgiver fit into this equation?
Well, forgive but don't forget. But at the same time, forgiveness isn't the process that happens automatically. It's something that you have to initiate on two sides. And it can be, I guess it could be an act of charity, in kind of a game theory sense. You come out, say, I will forgive this. Will you play along with me and move forward so we can forget this stupid one thing that happened? I'll forget it if you forget it, so we can move together as a group or as a country. And because there's bigger things that we need to work about, say like certain climate things, which are a lot more complicated than just kill the rich people that are polluting the world, and
like how affirmative action is more complicated than, racism is more complicated than just affirmative action.
Yeah,
that
like
kind of thing.
How where are you on the white supremacy scale? It's like, excuse me.
Well, the fact that somebody even designed that scale means that they had to be at least partially racist to begin with.
Now, here's my thought: is that when someone puts out a thing that says, "Can you believe this is happening? Can you believe?" and they're like, they're looking like they're indignant, so they put it out there because they expect everyone else to be indignant, so they can all be indignant together as a group. And when I see that, generally it'll have the opposite effect. I'll be like, do you expect just to go out there and everyone to be like, oh my God, I didn't know. What do I do? Do I contact my local representative? And, we got to start something. We got to start a movement and start discussions. It's like, does that actually happen? Is that what happens in your head when you put this stuff out there? Because, what happens in my head is, duh, that's happening. That's how humans act in this situation. And it starts, and I don't take that group as seriously because I see them as just like, trolls putting stuff out there, and it happens on both sides. So I'm sitting here going like, okay, you guys are nuts, I hate both of you. but
now I'm a powerless independent.
Right, but at the same time, you talk so, like, not you, Chris, but like, hypothetical you, they talk so much about racism and like, what about the black people, and like, I'm not hearing any voices from any black people when this is being said about, but now like I'm told that I'm racist because I'm white inherently, but then I didn't think about it before, but now you pass black people on the street and you're like, am I racist? Did I seem racist when I walked by? And I thought about that in my head one day, and I was just like, what the was that? And I was just like, well, that's your inherent racism. It's like, no, I wasn't worried about it before because I was just, they were just people that had darker.
It wasn't even a thing until you started making me self-conscious about it.
Yeah, so now I have to just
the anxiety aspect that
right. So that's not white supremacy. That's just internal anxiety.
Yeah, it's not even close to the same thing. It's thinking you're better than someone else, worrying about offending someone else.
Right, and then because we have this mentality, we end up segregating ourselves into these, identity silos, and which have their own little, okay, this group, it's like in a video game, okay, this group is at war with this group, so if they come into contact, then the script makes them fight, and it's a lot more complicated than that. It's just like, okay, these two groups can come together and be like, let's just live together. It's okay to be uneasy around people, it's okay to have preconceptions, but like, and yes, there is, like, if someone's actually actively racist or even just a troll about it, then yeah, that guy is actually doing something that needs action done upon them. Like, but it's systemic because the way we use language, it's like, that sounds like a scientific claim to me. Can you back that up with data? So to me, it all comes down to, if you accidentally act in a racist manner, and you can actually acknowledge it instead of just being like, wow, I was really anxious there. Why? It's because you're racist. It's like, why would I? It's like, they're not out to get me, they're out for a walk just like me, and like, they probably don't care. Why should I care? They're just going.
But maybe that should be motivation to go to like the media and say, hey, news reports, can you stop telling us that an offender is black? Like, maybe the news needs to stop accentuating it to make people stop thinking it subliminally.
Yeah, like, I can't read the Washington Post or the New York Times anymore.
But, and like, it might be an avenue to do something proactive about it.
Well,
rather than just being self-conscious and dealing with it personally on an interpersonal relationship basis.
now you say that, but we're actually doing that right now.
That's what we're doing, yeah.
Yeah.
But most people aren't motivated by their racism. They're not motivated to talk to a news editor, right? The first thing they'll do is they'll say, they'll get defensive and say, I'm not at all racist. I have a black friend.
Yeah. Well,
their impulse is to be defensive, and that's not helpful.
I wouldn't mind going on news sites to comment and be like, what are you talking about? But then I find the comments are actually just like you go into the comments and people are there's too much anonymity. You can like everyone's stuck in their place and they're just playing the game. It's like, oh, I riled them up and got them pissed off. Because a lot of people that, I guess we talked about those earlier, those people that just want a bit of chaos because, it's funny. I made them react. What's stupid?
It's exciting or whatever.
Yeah. So you get those people, and that's all that's going to happen in the comments. You're not going to convince anyone on the internet. They're not going to have that epiphany. So one thing you can do is you can have actual long form discussions, or you could just stop watching and engage somewhere else. So if people stop listening to the Washington Post as a paper will die. And then,
but that's almost a greater harm, right? When you've got newspapers and media outlets not knowing why the readership is going down, they're just going to start selling more people's private data and like using more clickbait ads and being, you know what I mean? Like they're just going to get worse.
I guess some of that has to come down to trust. I'll do what I can. I hope everyone else will do what they can. Please, everyone else do what they can. And like, if someone's acting like it, like someone says, there's something about the Jews, I'll be like, what the heck are you talking about? I'll be
we should direct our outrage towards the people who can make that change rather than like misdirecting our outrage to somewhere else. Like when the newspaper does something wrong, we shouldn't go to our MLA.
Right.
Or should we?
Well, we should go to our MLA when it's a political matter. Like I'm probably going to have to go to my MLA for the new bill that Trudeau came out with yesterday. So, because that's a political matter, it's literally in the House of Commons. I have to, if I want to have a say in that.
Being ignorant, and they're promoting ignorance in like an educational medium.
Yeah. So one thing you can do, and this is going to sound really, I know this is a bad word, but you can start a lobby group. And
that's what they're for.
Yeah, that's what they're for. You have a group of people of similar mind coming together on an issue, and your lobby group can argue with other lobby groups if they're, a respectable one, and don't just go, I'm not talking to you because I'm not talking to, this or that label that they put on you. Now, the thing is that if you are, if we actually allow for proper debate, then we will have more truth out there. I think we might be getting off track. But
sorry, the way we got here though was talking about the ramifications of forgiveness, whereas like a unilateral forgiveness of people for absolutely anything, just like in the World War or in today's standards with racism in the media and just systemic. I use the media as like an outlet for the system, so it's kind of the obvious example.
So
if people just forgive blindly, they're not going to solve any problems. Now, if they don't forgive blindly, they're going to cause more problems.
Now,
so where's that middle down?
Here's my thought, and I'm going to get, people aren't going to like this, but you have the issue between cops and Black Lives Matter, that kind of thing. Now, getting rid of cops is stupid. Racism against Black people is stupid. So, given that we have those two things, the cops should be finding ways to forgive Black people, not even forgive, because there are bad apples. Okay, I'm treading very lightly here. Now, Black Lives Matter also should be finding ways to create a scenario where they can come together and shake hands with each other and be like, let's move forward together.
With the police you're talking about.
With the police. Yeah. So we want people in groups to come to not be thinking about how can we get our ends, how can we come together in an act of, and part of this act is, only part of it is forgiveness. Okay, we're going to put the past behind us. I forgive you in your past ignorance. We forgive you in your past ignorance. Let's move forward together. And we have to, forgiveness is something that helps people get to that table. It's something to strive for, because how can we get to a place where we can say we're sorry? How can we get to a place where they can say they're sorry?
And not a forced apology
Right.
or an insincere fake one.
And not a photo
legitimate.
op. Yeah. Something where, okay, here's what we want to work towards. And the other side's like, no. And we get this, and this is essentially what diplomacy is. You know, it's like we could go to war, or we could have the most aggravating talks humanly possible. But I think a bird hit my window. The most aggravating talks in history, and anyone looking at them will be like, nothing's happening. But diplomacy is better than, war, because we forget this, and it'll be so easy to forget. People die in war. And I don't know why.
And wars take time too. So diplomacy is slow, but war is also very, very slow.
So every day that diplomats are doing talking instead of fighting is a day that we've gained, that we don't need to forgive another thing. And
we've saved expenses and reappropriation of industry and like wasteful use of like energy resources and money. So like the trauma on a generation that war causes them, like even in the 90s or the 2000s from the Afghanistan war, it's not that we lost hundreds of thousands of soldiers, but the few thousand we did lose compounded on top of all of the tens of thousands that were traumatized by it and came home, and we had to care for them and deal with the aftershock, right?
Yeah. In hindsight, we might look back on that and say that America and the world kind of needed to learn that lesson again. But I don't really want to say that.
No, that's another long discussion.
Yeah. Now I kind of want to bring it back maybe, because I think this is a good place to start wrapping up, because what's happening here is that a person you are at enmity with, a person that has slighted you or that you've slighted, is an enemy. And if you're a friend, you don't want to, the forgiveness allows you to keep friends as friends and turn enemies into acquaintances or even friends. It's not easy. It's not supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be hard, because it's supposed to be meaningful. And this is why you have that Christian notion. It's like, oh, you attacked me, I forgive you. And Jesus actually meant it, whether you believe in it or not, if it's just a story to you, if it's truth to you,
it's irrelevant.
It's irrelevant, because Jesus meant it. And he's the ideal forgiver. Not counting God, I guess.
Well, he is God, so it does count.
Yeah. Well, we're not going to get into, let's just counsel in IKEA. Let's do it again. Come on. No, but that's he's a example of what we should strive to be morally with regard to that. And I think that's a lesson that we should be taking in, not just like, oh yes, I will forgive people. No. This is not, so I'm not telling you go forgive something and your life will be great. This is something you need to start. If you're listening to this, forgiveness is a meditation. How can this exist in my life? And I use it, and I've used it for a long time, and it's created a lot of peace in my life. I have a very healthy relationship because I don't let things get out of control. I nip them in the bud, and I use forgiveness to do that. And it's hard, because I have to admit, going against, I lose face for half a second, and then I gain friends forever. So that's the pay. It's expensive up front, but it's got a big return. And maybe that goes into the sacrifice Jesus had to make for us in the
That's essentially what all forgiveness is. When you ask for forgiveness, you're sacrificing your own pride and dignity, and you know what I mean? Like you're offering yourself to submit to someone else
right.
in seeking an forgiveness for an apology.
Yeah. And
I think that's what's critical to understand, is that forgiveness is sort of an interpersonal relationship. Even when you're forgiving yourself for something, you're forgiving past you who is less self-aware than present you. Because if you knew better and didn't do it, you clearly didn't understand it as well as you know now if you feel remorse.
Yeah.
So there's always that two-party aspect to it. And nobody can really deny you of that. If you seek forgiveness, in my opinion, like genuinely and sincerely, and make the effort, and they don't offer it to you, all you can do is forgive yourself. There's no reason on earth that you should stop, living and just shut everything down and completely batten down the hatches because someone else won't offer a yes.
Yeah.
That's insane. Forgiveness is the process of seeking it and then accepting it for yourself if somebody else is seeking it from you. So it's a two-way street, but it's also part and parcel to it is it's like the self-acknowledgement of the remorse, basically. To go so far as to put yourself out to submit to somebody else is acknowledging to yourself that you truly are sorry for something. And that should be enough for you to forgive yourself. Yeah. And the other thing is, I just wanted to quickly mention before we wrap up too, and you did state this before, but I wanted to sort of quote you on it, that justice is not the same thing. Like forgiving somebody for something does not mean that they don't deserve to be punished for it. It has nothing to do, like if you forgive a murderer or a pedophile or something, it has nothing to do with how much jail time they should get.
Yeah.
Because you do want people to serve justice. Because if not for that one person to reoffend, there are also other people who might be discouraged from reoffending because they will be encouraged to offend if you let them off with an apology.
Right.
It would be counterproductive.
And I'm not the best Christian. Like I said at the beginning, if someone in that situation, if someone comes for me or my family, I'm going to act without remorse. I'm not going to look for forgiveness. Now, that being said, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not, hurt. But it's complicated. The justice and I don't know. I think we'll probably just end up rehashing this, but I think get yourself out of the wheel and move on to another path, because if you find yourself acting as a firebrand for one thing or another, chances are you're on the wheel. And forgiveness gets you off the wheel. You're asking someone to pull you off, and it is self-serving, but that's okay, because in helping yourself, you can help others better. And because we're existing not as selves in a cynical, give and take, zero sum, either I win or they win and the loser gets nothing. We're building relationships in society, and the individual is important, but we are an individual as a part in relation to everyone else in society. So this is a mechanism that we can't forget, and it's hard. So
word, dog.
That's I think it.
Cool. Well, thank you for an inspiring and riveting conversation as always.
Yep. Thanks
You've been listening
to
Frivolous Gravitas. We've got RSS feed now, chrisdriver.com/feed/rssfeed.xml for you podcast listeners out there who want the audio only version. But as always, we'll be publishing our videos to YouTube ad infinitum, regardless of how you prefer to consume our media. But any final thoughts, Jerry Springer time?
No, I think we're good. Thanks.
All right. Thanks for listening.